After the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, Henri of Navarre was now a prisoner inside the Louvre Palace. He survived the massacre itself thanks to his new wife Margot, but once he managed to survive the day, Henri fell into guilt and despair. Henri had received numerous warnings. His advisors all said it was too dangerous, but Henri still came. And now, countless friends, followers, and innocents who saw him as their rightful king are dead. But he had no time for sorrow. He was faced with an immediate choice: convert to Catholicism or die. It wasn't his first time facing such pressure. As a child, torn from his mother and raised at Catherine de' Medici's court, he had faced pressure to convert. But back then, he was just a small hostage child. Courtiers tolerated the stubborn little Huguenot kid even if he didn't formally convert. But now, he was a grown man. Refusing to convert meant death. And so, Henri woke from his daze, mentally shattered, weighed down by guilt, but he couldn't afford hesitation. And for him, the choice was clear. He had to live. Revenge, freedom of religion for Huguenots, all meant nothing to him if he is dead. So he declared his conversion to Catholicism with astonishing ease. And when he did, King Charles and Marguerite reportedly let out sighs of relief. Even Catherine de' Medici was pleased. Holding a Catholic converted Henri as a political pawn strengthened her hand in the royal court. The Duke of Guise, her political rival, wasn't quite satisfied, but there was nothing much he could do once Henri announced his conversion. Henri adapted quickly. He read the room. He understood who held the power and how fragile his position was. Henri de Guise had become immensely powerful after leading the massacre. But not even he could simply take the crown. King Charles IX still wore it, though the real authority rested with his mother, Catherine. The heir presumptive, Henri Duke of Anjou, hovered in the background. All of them were just barely over 20, and the rivalries among them were fierce. To complicate things further, Charles IX was frail and sickly. It seemed unlikely he would produce an heir. Marguerite had been long sidelined in court politics, but now she saw an opportunity through her younger brother, Hercule François, Duke of Alençon. If her elder brothers died childless, and if their mother passed, then perhaps the crown would come to Alençon, whom she can more easily control. And who is to say that, perhaps after Alençon, her turn would not come now that she is married to a man with a legitimate claim to the crown himself? As Margot's husband, Henri of Navarre was inevitably drawn into the swirling political storm. He had no allies in Catherine's side or the Guise side, so he forged ties with a third faction, with Margot and Hercule François. And around them gathered a ragtag coalition of nobles who fancied an early stake in whatever regime followed the Valois. Henri supplied the Huguenot muscle. Hercule François offered an extra Valois claim. Margot provided brains, charm, and unapologetic audacity. It was, in effect, a courtly minor league determined to knock the big clubs off the pitch. And for a short while, things were going as Margot expected. Her brother, Charles IX, the reigning king at the time, fell gravely ill and soon died. The throne then passed to the next brother, Henri, who became Henri III. But Margot's little minor league power alliance began to wobble almost as soon as it started. Somehow, Margot's relationship with her husband, Henri of Navarre, took a dramatic nosedive around the time Henri III succeeded Charles IX. The reason? As Henri of Navarre entered his 20s, he discovered or rediscovered a deep and abiding passion for women. And among the court ladies, one person in particular, named Charlotte de Sauve, caught his eyes, and mesmerized by her charms, Henri promptly started to ignore his wife. The twist? Charlotte wasn't content with just one royal suitor. She was also stringing along Margot's younger brother, Hercule François, the Duke of Alençon. Her manipulative finesse was so exceptional that both men became completely obsessed, consumed with jealousy, and too busy chasing her skirts to bother with matters like duty, ambition, or, say, the future of France. Margot's memoir detailed how the two men chased the Sauve, abandoning their lofty goals. The rivalry between Henri and Hercule François wasn't mere playground drama either. It was getting serious. And, as everyone might have guessed by now, Charlotte de Sauve wasn't simply a flirt. She was one of Catherine de Médicis' flying squadron, a femme fatale in the Queen Mother's personal espionage squad. Catherine had weaponized seduction, using Charlotte to pit Henri and Hercule François against each other, and thereby keeping Margot's ambitions in check. Tactical brilliance, really. At this stage, the mother still had the upper hand over the daughter. Now Henri's infidelities weren't exactly discreet. They were, in fact, operatic. Furious and unwilling to be outdone, Margot decided that it was time for a payback. Given that she possessed no small amount of seductive charm herself, it wasn't hard for her to find lovers. But for a woman in her position, affairs came with complications. Men in those days could dally freely and take mistresses with very little consequences. But a woman, even a royal one, could face ruin if she gets caught, especially if that woman's mother was Catherine de Médicis and her brother was Henri III. So Margot's lovers were, quite literally, risking their necks. And added to that, Catherine had eyes and ears in every corner of the palace, and it was said you couldn't even sneeze in a hallway without someone reporting it. So naturally, she was caught, repeatedly. Once she was caught in an affair with a friend of her brother Hercule François. Henri III, ever the drama queen, if you know what I mean, sent assassins to kill the poor fellow. He just barely escaped with his life and promptly left Paris. Another one of Margot's alleged lovers was accused of keeping a doll of Charles IX and stabbing it with needles to put a curse on the king. Yes, the age-old voodoo doll routine. And, whether by coincidence or by dark magic, Charles did start wasting away. And Margot's lover? He was tortured and then executed. So, as you can imagine, romance was not exactly relaxing for Margot. There was always someone watching, judging, or sharpening the knives. But still, if Henri of Navarre could sleep around, then she would gladly return the favor, eye for an eye, and then some, allegedly. And nowadays, this might simply cause a few Twitter X blue sky threads for a day or two and quickly forgotten. But in 16th century France, this can make a royal scandal of thermonuclear proportions. Catherine and Henri III had to scramble to contain the fallout. And to put it very, very mildly, they were not amused. Now, you might be wondering, if both Margot and Henri of Navarre were such attractive, passionate, pleasure-seeking youngsters in their 20s, why didn't they just enjoy each other? Why all the sneaking around, the endless affairs, and the romantic chaos? No one really knows. Some online sources suggest that Margot wrote in her memoir that, "When I thought of making love to Henri, I was overcome by such a strange pain I could not bear it." It seems to suggest that something was off between them and there was no chemistry. But there is no such passage in Margot's memoirs, even though she wrote about the challenging political circumstances of their marriage. What seems to be true is that there were constant rumors of their affairs even from the early days of their marriage, whether true or exaggerated. And yet, politically, They were solid partners. Both Margot and Henri understood how valuable the other was in the dangerous chess game of French politics, especially under the watchful, suffocating eye of Catherine de Medicis and King Henri III. Eventually, Margot decided that as long as she and Henri remained under her mother's surveillance, things could go terribly wrong at any moment. They had to escape. But escaping together was impossible. Any attempt to leave the court attracted an entire escort of guards. So Margot devised a plan. Henri would escape alone. She will stay behind and wait for her chance. And perhaps Henri can get her out in due time. She spent months preparing. A royal hunting trip was coming up, and they saw an opportunity there. Margot played her role to perfection. She made a great show of preparing Henri's hunting clothes, acting as though nothing unusual was afoot. Catherine and Henri III, seeing nothing amiss, assigned only a minimal escort to accompany him. It was just a routine outing. Margot and Henri had joined hunting trips before, with no troubles from either of them. But during this hunt, Henri slipped away. Waiting nearby were a group of Huguenot allies who quietly merged with his party. Together, they veered off the planned route and made a break for it, riding hard until they crossed the Loire River and reached safety in Navarre. And once he was free, Henri immediately renounced Catholicism and publicly declared himself a Protestant again. The year was 1576. He had spent 4 years as a prisoner guest of the French crown, technically the king's brother-in-law, but very much under house arrest. Now he was free again, a king was more in his own right, but his wife was still at Louvre. Henri's escape was no small matter. The Catholic world saw Henri with just about the same level of suspicion and hostility as figures like Queen Elizabeth I of England, or William of Orange, or Willem van Oranje in the Netherlands. To the Catholic powers, he was dangerous, but to Huguenots, he was a beacon of hope, a living symbol around which they could rally for vengeance after the massacres. But while Henri gained his freedom, Margot paid the price. Her mother, Catherine de Medicis, and her brother, King Henri III, were furious, and they punished her severely. Margot was stripped of lands, wealth, and her personal freedom. She was essentially placed under house arrest for nearly 2 years. During that time, Henri kept demanding her release, writing repeatedly to Catherine and the king, insisting that his wife be sent to him. After all, he was the hostage, not her. And Catherine? She had no political reason to keep Margot anymore. But spite is a powerful thing, especially coming from a controlling mother who never had any of her children disobey her so blatantly. And Catherine might have felt Margot needed to be taught a lesson. So she dragged her feet for nearly 2 years, perhaps out of nothing more than the desire to make a point to her disobedient daughter. But eventually her temper cooled, and Margot was finally allowed to go to Navarre. So 6 years after their wedding, the Queen of Navarre finally came to her husband's land for the first time. Despite all their extramarital affairs, Henri welcomed her with arms wide open. After all, she had risked everything to help him escape, and she was a valuable political ally. And for a while, things went rather well. Margot had always been shrewd and politically savvy, and in Navarre, she used those skills not for her mother or her brother, the French king, but for her husband's cause. During the Civil War, she took over royal duties while Henri was at the front. In peace talks, she fought tooth and nail to extract the best possible terms for Navarre. She herself never abandoned Catholicism, but she nonetheless worked tirelessly to support the Protestant cause. So, for a little while, this marriage seemed to be working, sort of. But, unfortunately, this did not last long. Their relationship was never tranquil to begin with, and it would descend into even greater madness. But that's a story for the next time.